Right. So anyone tuning in is obviously interested in the future of AI. So that's what we're talking about today.
Absolutely.
Specifically, we are doing a deep dive on this fascinating research paper, DeepSeek R1, Incentivizing Reasoning Capability in LLMs via Reinforcement Learning.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
But it is a
It's,
mouthful.
it's a really interesting paper. It's not about making AI bigger. It's about making it think smarter.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people are really starting to grasp now, right?
Yeah.
Like we've had these big flashy things that can write poems and,
Right.
create images and all this stuff, but they haven't really been able to reason in a way that feels human.
Exactly. And I think, you've probably noticed this with current AI. It's amazing at some things.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it really struggles with the kind of reasoning that we humans do naturally.
Like my AI assistant can write me a poem, but ask it to like plan a trip with all the logic that goes into that.
Right.
And it falls apart.
Exactly. Like multi-step reasoning is something that has really eluded these models. And I think this paper is starting to get at some of the solutions to that.
So what is DeepSeek R10 all about?
Well, DeepSeek R10, it's this really interesting idea.
It sounds very sci-fi.
It does sound sci-fi, but it's actually, the idea is to let AI learn through pure reinforcement learning, or as we call it in the biz, RL.
So I'm familiar with RL from like those chess AIs that just play millions and millions of games against themselves.
Exactly.
Is that the kind of thing we're talking about here?
That's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. So they tested this DeepSeek R10 model on this really hard math exam, the AA math exam.
Yeah.
And initially it did terribly, right? Like 15.6%.
Yeah, I was going to say that's failing in most cases.
Yeah, it's a dismal score. But then what they did was they just let it learn through RL. And eventually it got to 71%.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
Yeah, and that's without giving it any extra data, any extra information, just letting it learn through trial and error.
So was there something different about the way that it was learning that was enabling this massive improvement?
Yeah, I think one of the most fascinating things about this is that the researchers actually observed what they call an aha moment during this training process.
Really?
Yeah, so they saw that the model kind of hit a wall, right? It was improving and improving, and then it seemed to kind of plateau.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden it shifted its approach and it started making these huge leaps in performance. And when they looked closely at what was happening, they realized that the model was actually demonstrating a deeper level of understanding.
So it was like figuring out the concepts rather than just
Yeah.
crunching numbers.
Yeah, it was like rethinking how to solve these problems, and that's something we haven't really seen in AI before.
That is wild.
Yeah, it's really exciting stuff.
So DeepSeek R1 is even better than this, right?
Yes. So DeepSeek R1 is the next evolution of this, and they still use RL, but they add a bit of what they call cold start data.
Okay.
And so this cold start data is essentially just giving the model a little bit of a head start in the right direction.
So it's like giving it some foundational knowledge
Yeah.
to work with. And I'm guessing that also helped with the readability problem that they talked about.
Exactly. So one of the issues with the initial DeepSeek R10 model was that even though it was getting good results, it was really hard to understand how it was getting to those results.
Right.
Like its reasoning process was very opaque.
Also, it was like a black box almost.
Yeah, it was a bit of a black box. And so by adding this cold start data, they were able to kind of guide the model towards a more human understandable reasoning process.
So they didn't want better performance. They also wanted to be able to understand.
Yes, exactly. They wanted to make sure that they could understand how the AI was reaching its conclusions.
So did they manage to fix that problem completely?
Yeah, they made huge strides in improving the readability, and they also found that it actually improved performance as well.
Oh, wow. So two birds, one stone.
Exactly.
So now we have DeepSeek R1, which is this reasoning powerhouse.
Yeah.
It sounds very complex. Does that mean only people with massive computing power can actually use this?
That's where things get really interesting. They actually managed to distill the essence of DeepSeek R1 into much smaller models.
Distillation, so it's like concentrating it?
Yeah, like concentrating its knowledge into a more potent form.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that these smaller distilled models actually outperform much larger AI models that haven't been trained with this focus on reasoning.
So wait, even though they're smaller, they're actually better.
Yes, in many cases they're actually better because they've been trained with this specific focus on reasoning.
That's amazing. And that also means that it's more accessible, right?
Exactly. It means that we could potentially have access to this really powerful AI on everyday devices.
That really is a game changer.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
But hang on, if distillation is so effective, why even bother with all that initial RL training?
That's a great question, and that's exactly the question that the researchers tackled next. And what they found is that, at least for now, distillation is far more efficient and effective than just doing pure RL training on these smaller models.
So it's like having a mentor guide you.
Exactly. It's like having a mentor guide you versus trying to figure everything out from scratch.
Versus brute forcing it, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So this mentorship approach seems to be key. It makes you wonder what else we can learn from how DeepSeek R1 was trained and the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the key takeaways here is that understanding how AI learns is just as important as raw computing power.
So it's not just about throwing more data at the problem.
Exactly. It's not about bigger is better, it's about smarter.
Okay, so DeepSeek R1 is this impressive reasoning AI. They figured out how to make it more accessible. Were there any limitations? Were there any tasks where it didn't quite live up to the hype?
You're always good at keeping us grounded. It did have some limitations, for example. It showed a lot of promise in tackling some software engineering tasks,
Okay.
but it didn't quite reach the level of expertise that they were hoping for.
So it aced the math test, but still needs some coding lessons.
Exactly. And I think those tasks require a very specific kind of knowledge and context, and it's proving to be quite a challenge.
Okay, so it can't do everything just yet.
Not just yet, but it's getting there.
But they did manage to solve the language mixing issue, right?
Yes. So you remember how I mentioned that DeepSeek R10 was a bit of a linguistic jumble?
Yeah, it was switching between like English and Chinese and German and...
It was all over the place. And so what they did was they incorporated something called a language consistency reward during the training.
Okay.
And basically they penalized the model for switching between languages.
So kind of like a language filter to keep its thoughts organized.
Exactly. And that way its reasoning process is much clearer for us humans to follow.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you want to understand how it's thinking, you kind of need it to stick to one language.
Stick to one language at a time, at least.
Did that affect the performance at all?
So it did lead to a slight performance dip on certain benchmarks, but the researchers argue that the trade-off is worth it for the increased transparency and user-friendliness.
Makes sense, because if it's easier to understand how it's thinking,
Right.
it's easier to trust it.
And it's easier to work with it.
And it's easier to work with it, exactly.
Right.
So it's prioritizing clear communication over pure computational power.
Exactly.
It's more about a collaboration between humans and AI than just raw performance.
I like that. I like that way of putting it.
Right, because ultimately, I think that's where we're headed anyway, right? Is this idea of humans and AI working together.
Absolutely. And, you know, speaking of collaboration, they touched on this really interesting idea of personalized AI tutors.
Yes.
You know, AI that could adapt to your individual learning style and help you understand complex concepts.
That was the part that really blew my mind when I was reading this, because you think about like, okay, if we can distill this knowledge into these smaller models and personalize it, then you could have this like AI tutor that just knows exactly how you learn best and can explain things in a way that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it could revolutionize education. I think that's one of the most exciting potential applications of this technology.
Do you think that's something that we could see in the near future?
I think it's definitely within the realm of possibility, especially with these advancements in distillation. If we can get these really powerful reasoning capabilities running on personal devices and then personalize them to individuals' needs, I think it could happen sooner than we think.
It's a very exciting thought. But even with all this progress, there are still limitations to what AI can do right.
Of course.
What are some of the challenges researchers are still grappling with when it comes to reasoning in AI?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is moving beyond what we call narrow AI.
Okay.
So DeepSeek R1, it excels at these specific tasks, you know, math problems, coding challenges.
Right.
But human reasoning is much more adaptable.
We can apply our knowledge to all these different situations, right?
Exactly. We can connect ideas across different fields, and AI is still catching up in that department.
So like DeepSeek R1 could solve a really complex equation, but it might struggle to understand the nuances of a novel.
A great analogy. I think that's exactly right. And then there's also the challenge of common sense reasoning.
Okay.
Which is something that we humans take for granted. You know, we know that if we drop a glass, it's probably going to break.
Right.
We don't have to run a simulation in our heads to figure that out. But teaching that kind of common sense to AI, that's a really tough nut to crack.
Because it's like this unspoken knowledge that we all have, right?
Exactly. It's like this vast library of implicit knowledge that we've accumulated over our lifetimes, and it's really hard to formalize that in a way that an AI can understand.
So how do they even begin to try to program that into AI?
Well, some researchers are trying to train these AI models on massive data sets of text and code, hoping that they'll kind of pick up some of that implicit knowledge just through exposure.
Okay, so like through osmosis almost.
Yeah, kind of like osmosis.
Hmm.
And then others are experimenting with new architectures that try to mimic the way that the human brain works.
So they're trying to basically recreate that spark, that
Yeah.
intuitive leap of understanding.
Yeah, that intuitive leap that humans are so good at.
So it's an incredibly ambitious goal.
Yeah.
But even if we can't perfectly replicate human reasoning, the progress that we're seeing is still pretty mind-blowing.
Absolutely. I mean, just to see these AI models not just following instructions, but starting to think to reason, to solve problems in ways that surprise us, it's incredible.
It's a testament to human ingenuity, but also a reminder that we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this field so exciting.
Absolutely.
There's so much more to discover.
And the best part is we're all part of this journey, right?
Yeah.
Like our listeners are the ones who are going to be using and interacting with these systems and ultimately shaping their development and deciding how they're going to be integrated into our lives.
And I think that's a really crucial point. It's not just up to the researchers and the developers. It's up to all of us to shape the future of AI.
But before we get too carried away with the future, let's bring things back down to earth for a moment.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the technical aspects, but what about the impact of this technology?
Right.
How do we ensure that these increasingly powerful AI systems are used responsibly?
That's a crucial question, and I think it's one that we need to be thinking about very carefully.
Right.
We need to involve not just scientists and engineers, but also ethicists, social scientists, policymakers, and the public at large in shaping the future of AI.
It's not just about the technology itself, it's about the impact it's going to have on our lives.
Exactly. It's about our values, our way of life.
Yeah.
And that's a responsibility we all share.
It's about making sure that these incredible advancements are used for good,
Absolutely.
for the benefit of all humankind.
That's a future worth striving for.
Well said. So this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of DeepSeek R1.
It really has.
And I hope our listeners are feeling as inspired and energized as I am. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've talked about DeepSeek R1, learning to think, to reason, to solve problems. But what if we took this a step further?
Okay.
What if we could create AI that not only thinks like us, but also feels like us?
Wow.
AI that can understand and respond to human emotions, that can empathize with our joys and sorrows, that can even experience the world in a way that's uniquely its own.
That's a profound question. I mean,
Yeah.
Is consciousness something that can be programmed?
Yeah.
Or is it something that emerges from complex systems? Can machines truly feel, or are they just simulating emotions based on algorithms?
These are questions that we don't have the answers to yet,
Right.
but they're questions worth pondering as we continue to push the boundaries of what's possible with AI. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be having a deep dive with an AI co-host
That's a thought.
who can share their own thoughts and feelings on these very topics.
That would certainly be a deep dive I wouldn't want to miss.
Right.
But until then, I think this research offers a glimpse into a future where AI is not just a tool, but a collaborator, a partner in exploration and discovery.
A partner that can help us understand not just the world around us, but also ourselves.
Exactly.
And maybe teach us a thing or two about thinking in new and unexpected ways.
And who knows, maybe those personalized AI tutors could help us all become a little more like DeepSeek R1 ourselves. More logical, more analytical, more capable of solving complex problems.
I would sign up for that upgrade.
Me too.
But hey, we've been talking about this amazing AI research, and I bet our listeners are itching to learn more. Where can they go to delve deeper into the world of DeepSeek R1?
Well, the great news is the researchers have been incredibly open with their work. They've made the code for DeepSeek R1 publicly available, and they've even released several smaller distilled models that people can experiment with.
So you don't need a supercomputer to start exploring these cutting-edge techniques.
Nope, you can download the tools and start tinkering.
That's the beauty of open source research.
Absolutely.
It democratizes access to knowledge and empowers anyone to contribute to the advancement of AI.
And I think that's a crucial point. The future of AI isn't something that's being decided in a handful of tech labs.
Right.
It's being shaped by a global community of researchers, developers, and enthusiasts who are all passionate about exploring the potential of this technology.
So to our listeners, I say this, don't just be a consumer of AI, be a creator.
Yeah.
Dive into the code experiment with these models, and who knows, maybe you'll be the one to make the next breakthrough in AI reasoning.
The future is waiting to be written, and the pen, or should I say the keyboard, is in your hands.
Well said. And on that note of empowerment and possibility, we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive into DeepSeek R1. We'll be back soon with even more insights and discussions about this groundbreaking research. But until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and as always, happy learning.
See you next time. It really does make you think, like we're starting to see these hints of deeper understanding in AI.
It really does. It's like a whole new level of intelligence is emerging.
It's not just about processing information anymore. It's about understanding it on a deeper level.
So if DeepSeek R1 is capable of this kind of reasoning, what are the implications for things like scientific discovery? Could it help us generate new ideas or solve problems in ways that we haven't even imagined?
I think the potential is enormous. Like, imagine an AI that could analyze vast amounts of scientific data, identify patterns, and propose new hypotheses.
It's like a true research partner.
Exactly. Or an AI that could collaborate with artists and musicians, pushing the boundaries of creativity.
That would be amazing. A true partner in discovery, not just a tool. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. DeepSeek R1 is a big step forward, but it's not perfect. What are some of the challenges that still need to be addressed before we see widespread adoption of this technology?
Well, one of the key challenges is ensuring robustness. We need to make sure that these reasoning abilities are reliable across different contexts and domains.
So it's not just about acing the test in the classroom, but also being able to apply that knowledge in the real world.
Exactly. We need to make sure that these models don't produce unexpected or erroneous results when they encounter something new or outside of their training data.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it needs to be able to generalize its knowledge.
Exactly. And another area that needs further exploration is the explainability of these reasoning processes.
Okay.
Even though DeepSeek R1 is more transparent than previous models, it's still kind of a black box.
Right. We don't always know exactly how it's arriving at its conclusions.
Exactly. And we need to develop better methods for understanding how these models are thinking, especially if we're going to use them for things like medical diagnosis or financial decisions where trust and accountability are crucial.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we're going to be relying on AI for important decisions, we need to be able to understand why it's making those recommendations.
Right. So there's a lot of research being done on how to make these AI models more transparent, more interpretable.
So what are some potential strategies for addressing this explainability challenge?
Well, one approach is to develop new visualization tools that can help us map out the decision-making processes of these models so we can actually see how the AI is thinking step by step.
So it's like creating a visual representation of its thought process.
Exactly. And another approach is to create more human interpretable representations of the knowledge that these models have acquired.
So translating the AI's thoughts into something that we can easily grasp.
Exactly. Maybe using natural language or visual metaphors, something that makes sense to us humans.
I like that idea. So it's about bridging that gap between the way AI thinks and the way we think.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges, I'm curious about the future of this research. What are some of the directions that the DeepSeek team is planning to explore next?
Yeah, where do we go from here?
Well, one of the most exciting areas is the potential for transfer learning.
Okay.
The idea is to take the reasoning abilities that DeepSeek R1 has developed and apply them to new domains and tasks with minimal additional training.
So like teaching it to play chess and then seeing if it can use those strategic skills to navigate a complex negotiation.
Exactly. If we can achieve that kind of transfer learning, it would significantly expand the potential applications of this technology.
That would be incredible. It would open up a whole new world of possibilities for AI to assist us in all sorts of complex tasks. And I imagine it would also accelerate the development of new AI applications, right?
Absolutely. If you don't have to start from scratch every time, you can build on existing knowledge and capabilities much more quickly.
That makes sense. So transfer learning is like a key to unlocking the full potential of AI reasoning.
I think so. It's one of the most promising areas of research in AI right now.
And speaking of unlocking potential, remember when we talked about those smaller distilled models?
Yeah.
What if we could take that concept even further? Could we create specialized AI agents that are tailored for specific tasks or industries, each drawing on the reasoning power of DeepSeek R1, but optimized for its unique purpose?
Now, that's a brilliant idea. You could have a DeepSeek R1-powered medical diagnosis assistant, a DeepSeek R1-powered legal expert, a DeepSeek R1-powered financial advisor.
Each one fine-tuned for its specific domain.
Exactly. And each of those specialized agents could then continue to learn and improve within their specific domain, building on that foundational reasoning capability. It's like creating a whole ecosystem of intelligent agents that are all interconnected and constantly evolving.
That's a really compelling vision.
Hmm.
It's like we're not just creating one super intelligent AI, we're creating a whole network of specialized AIs that can work together to solve complex problems.
Exactly. And that network could then be used to tackle some of the biggest challenges facing humanity, from climate change to disease to poverty.
It's an incredibly exciting prospect, but it also raises some important questions about the role of AI in society, right?
Absolutely. We need to be thinking about how these AI systems will impact our lives, our jobs, our relationships.
And how do we ensure that these powerful AI systems are used for good?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We need to make sure that AI is aligned with human values and that it's used to benefit society as a whole.
So it's not just about technological progress, it's about ethical progress as well.
Exactly. We need to be thinking about the ethical implications of AI every step of the way.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the potential benefits of DeepSeek R1, but what about the potential risks? Any technology this powerful is bound to have some downsides as well. What are some of the things we need to be cautious about as this technology continues to develop?
That's a crucial point. It's important to acknowledge that any technology, especially one as powerful as AI, can be used for good or for bad.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. And one concern that I have is the potential for these reasoning abilities to be used for malicious purposes.
Right, so we could end up with AI systems that are capable of outsmarting humans in ways that could be harmful.
Exactly. That's a very real concern and something that we need to be taking very seriously.
So what steps can we take to mitigate that risk?
Well, one important step is to establish clear ethical guidelines for the development and deployment of AI systems. We need to make sure that these systems are aligned with human values and that they're used for beneficial purposes.
So it's about setting boundaries and making sure that AI is used responsibly.
Exactly. And it's not just a job for researchers and developers. It's something that requires a societal conversation involving ethicists, policymakers, and the public at large.
Right, it's a shared responsibility.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in shaping the future of AI.
And another potential risk is that we become overly reliant on these AI systems, outsourcing our own critical thinking and decision-making abilities.
That's another great point. It's important to remember that AI systems are tools, and like any tool, they can be used wisely or unwisely.
Yeah, we need to be careful not to become too dependent on AI.
Exactly. We need to maintain our own agency and judgment, using these tools to augment our own intelligence, not replace it.
So it's about finding the right balance between human intelligence and artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And I think that's the key to unlocking the full potential of AI.
So it's not about humans versus machines. It's about humans and machines working together.
Absolutely. It's about collaboration and partnership, leveraging the strengths of both to achieve common goals.
And that brings us back to this idea of collaboration. If we can foster a spirit of partnership between humans and AI, where each side learns from the other and contributes their unique perspectives, then I think we can truly unlock the transformative potential of this technology.
I completely agree. It's an exciting and challenging journey ahead, but I have a feeling it's going to lead to some truly remarkable discoveries along the way.
Speaking of discoveries, I bet our listeners are eager to learn more about DeepSeek R1 and experiment with it themselves. Where can they go to delve deeper into this research?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the researchers have made the code for DeepSeek R1 publicly available.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And they've also published a detailed paper outlining their methods and findings.
So it's all out there for anyone who wants to explore it.
Exactly. And they've even released some pre-trained models that people can experiment with, so you don't need a supercomputer to start playing around with this technology.
That's great news for anyone who wants to get their hands dirty and see how this all works firsthand.
Absolutely. There's nothing quite like diving into the code and experimenting to really understand how something works.
That's the beauty of open source research, right?
Yeah.
It democratizes access to knowledge and empowers anyone to contribute to the advancement of AI.
And I think that's a really important point. The future of AI isn't being decided in a handful of elite labs. It's being shaped by a global community of researchers, developers, and enthusiasts who are all passionate about exploring the potential of this technology.
So to our listeners, I say this: don't just be consumers of AI, be creators. Dive into the code experiment and let your curiosity lead the way.
The future is waiting to be written, and you have the tools to shape it.
Okay, We've covered a lot of ground today, from the technical details of DeepSeek R1 to its potential impact on society. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've talked about AI learning to reason, to solve problems, to even collaborate with us in new and exciting ways. But what about the emotional side of intelligence? What about things like empathy, intuition, and creativity?
That's a fascinating question. Can we teach AI to understand and respond to human emotions? Can we create AI that can not only think, but also feel? It really makes you think. Could an AI ever really feel emotions the way we do?
Yeah, would it be like our emotions or something completely different?
It's hard to even imagine, right?
Totally. But, okay, let's come back to the real world for a minute. We've talked about the good stuff DeepSeek R1 can do, but are there any downsides? Any risks?
Oh, absolutely. Any technology this powerful, there's going to be two sides to the coin.
Right. So what should we be watching out for as this AI gets even smarter?
One big concern is bias. You see, these AI systems, they learn from data we humans create, and that data, well, it's got all our own biases baked in.
So, like, if the data is biased, the AI could become biased too.
Exactly. If we aren't really careful, we could end up with AI systems that are unfair, that discriminate, even if we didn't mean for that to happen.
That's kind of scary. So how do we prevent that? How do we make sure AI is ethical?
It takes a lot of effort. We need to make sure the data we use to train AI is diverse, includes everyone, not just one group.
So, like, making sure everyone's represented.
Exactly. And we also have to watch out for something called algorithmic bias. This can happen even if the data is okay. It's about the way the AI processes information, the algorithms themselves.
Oh, so it's like two levels of bias to watch out for: the data and the way the AI uses it.
Right. So we need ways to check these algorithms, make sure they're making decisions fairly.
That sounds complicated. Are there people working on this, like trying to make sure AI is used ethically?
Absolutely. Lots of organizations are focused on this, from research groups to companies to governments.
Oh, good. So they're making rules and stuff.
Yeah, like guidelines for how to develop AI responsibly. And the cool thing is, it's not just tech people. You've got ethicists, social scientists, all sorts of experts working together.
That's awesome. But regular people, like our listeners, do we have a role to play in this?
Big time. The future of AI, it shouldn't just be decided by a few experts. We all need to be part of the conversation, talking about how AI should and shouldn't be used.
It's going to affect all our lives, so
Yeah.
we should have a say.
Exactly. We need people from all backgrounds sharing their thoughts and concerns. That's how we'll make sure AI is a force for good.
And that includes making sure the people building these AI systems are from diverse backgrounds too, right?
So important. If it's just one type of person making all the decisions, their biases are going to show up in the AI.
Right. So we need more diversity in the tech world in general.
Absolutely. We need everyone at the table, everyone contributing to making AI work for the benefit of humanity.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We talked about DeepSeek R1, how awesome it is, but also the challenges, the ethics, the whole picture.
It's been a great discussion. I hope our listeners have learned a ton about AI and where it might be headed.
Me too. And before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. The future of AI, it's not set in stone. It's something we're all creating right now with the choices we make.
That's a powerful way to put it.
So stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay involved. The future of AI is literally in our hands.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been a pleasure joining you for this deep dive into DeepSeek R1.
And a huge thank you to all our listeners for tuning in and joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious and remember the future is waiting to be written.
We'll see you next time, folks.